Hello, everyone, and welcome to College of Ag Week. Today, we are discussing the Masters of Science program in Agriculture and Natural Resources. As we're going through this presentation, if you do have questions, please go ahead and submit those using the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll handle those at the end. I'm joined today by Dr. Heather Mathewson, who serves as faculty coordinator for this program. And so at this time, I will just turn things over to her.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. So I am an associate professor in the Wildlife and Natural Resources Department, and I do coordinate the graduate program. Our program is bigger than just our department. We have many partnerships, including Texas A&M AgriLife Research and Extension that's located here in Stephenville, Texas. We do quite a bit of work with them. We also do a lot of work with the Fossil Rim Wildlife Center, which is located about 30 minutes south of us in Glen Rose, Texas. We do a lot of our animal and our captive animal conservation work with them through both student internships, but also our graduate students participate in research. We work closely with Texas Parks and Wildlife at several of their wildlife management areas and also at several state parks, such as Palo Pinto Mountain State Park, Caprock Canyon State Park. We also work with the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, located in Dallas. Many of our faculty work with Cheetah Conservation Botswana, located in Botswana, that we do a lot of work over there. And we also have a lot of work that we do with private lands and private landowners here in around Texas. Our disciplines for our master's program primarily focus on wildlife ecology, entomology. We've got a very active entomology program here, natural resources, plant sciences, horticulture, aquaponics, and our zoo and captive animal management conservation, which is kind of one of our newer disciplines within our program. Our master's program offers two tracks that we call them. The first one is the research track. You could think of this as the thesis track. And then the second one is the professional or the non-thesis track. They are very similar, except for in the sense that for both of them, you're going to find a chair or somebody who's your main advisor, and you're going to form a committee, just as you would for both of them. You have to maintain a GPA of a 3.0 on a 4-point scale. That's a university requirement. And the program for the total degree hours is 36 credit hours to earn your degree. Also, both of the tracks, the students will take a comprehensive exam in their last semester. And that is it could be an oral, it may be a written exam. It's decided by the committee, but it is a comprehensive exam about your entire experience while you're here for the duration of your master's degree. The differences between them is that the research track also conducts their own original research and produces at the end of the degree a thesis. So they will also do a thesis defense that's associated with their comprehensive exam. Those are the two different tracks. Usually the research track is of interest to students who want to go into research programs, either as a researcher or somebody who is maybe going into a university or educational route. The professional track is often of interest to students who may be slightly changing their discipline or who are needing some more hours of coursework. Because with the professional track, you're taking 36 credit hours of mostly face-to-face classes, whereas for the research track, 12 of those hours are what we call thesis or research credits, which means that you're not actually in a face-to-face class where you're learning content, but instead you're taking the hours so that you can collect your data and that you can work on writing your thesis. For admission into our program, we do require that applicants have a 4-year degree, an undergraduate degree, preferably in the natural resources or a related field. We have taken students into the program that have a background in other disciplines, and that sometimes will involve a special conversation about maybe taking a leveling class or what experiences or knowledge that applicant may have. So we will make exceptions to it. The process of it is that the faculty will evaluate those other degrees. You need to have had a minimum of a 3.0 in the last 60 hours of the coursework. So that eliminates all those kind of lower grades that we get in like some of those harder classes when we first get to undergrad. So those last 60 hours are usually your upper level work that's a little bit more discipline specific. So that's why we focus on that as well. We do consider students who have a lower GPA though. Like I said, we sometimes have special admissions or circumstances about admissions. We also will consider previous work experience. So maybe you've been out of undergrad for several years and want to go back and pursue a graduate degree. We will also consider any of the experiences that you've had, in between that time. We do not require GRE for admission into our program. There's the possibility of some exceptions, however, and those are often based on where perhaps funding is coming from or maybe certain requirements for certain fellowship or something. So there are some exceptions, and we can be a little flexible on our program admissions too. So in addition to what is required to apply, you also have to take some additional steps where you have to find a committee chair. So before you even apply to to the College of Graduate Studies, to the program, you should contact our faculty. You should get on the website, look up some information about our different faculty, what our research interests are, what interests we have. And you'll notice that through this presentation, we've got some photographs. And at the bottom of those photographs, we are often mentioning who some of the professors are that are involved in the research that is shown in the photograph. So contact the faculty and find out who might be doing something that matches your interests or research interests. And then you'll need to communicate with them and get a commitment from them for them to serve as your chair. Once that's accomplished, you can then do your application to the graduate school. You may also find out about positions through direct application from an announcement. So you may find that we are announcing that we have a master's position open on any of the job boards that are out there. And those announcements may have some additional instructions for application. So pay close attention to those details. You will submit a letter of interest. And so in that letter, just identify what your career goals are. You need to let me know if you're going to go the research or the professional track. And then you also need to tell me who your committee chair is and that they've agreed to serve as your chair. You also will need to submit your resume. This allows us to understand what experiences that you've had and what knowledge, skills that you have. Make sure that your resume is not limited to one page. Please make it as thorough as possible and not try to limit it. We'd like to get to know all about you and the things that you've done in the past. And then all of this information will go to the graduate faculty, and we will then, as a group, decide upon acceptance into the program. For the curriculum, for the two different tracks, they both require taking a natural resource ecology course. They also have graduate seminars. These are just 1-hour seminars, oftentimes of very diverse topics, different topics. For the research track, you also will take a research methods class. That's an analytical, statistical approach for analyzing data, a principles of research class, an additional quantitative class as well. So you'll take 2 statistics classes at minimum, and then some elective hours, as well as those graduate seminars. For the professional track, it's just the required courses and then some of the elective hours. And we design the curriculum for a student based on the student's needs and interests. So other than those classes that I mentioned that are required, those electives that you will take are going to be dependent upon if you maybe did not get a class as an undergraduate that we think is a critical class for somebody with this degree, for somebody to have, or if you were very interested in going into a certain avenue or a certain career we want to be able to be flexible with that curriculum so that you are taking the classes that you need in order to reach that those goals. And some of the electives that we offer in our master's program are listed here for you. We have fire ecology, where there's actually an option in that to get some of the certifications done so that you can be involved in prescribed burns. We have a couple of classes on, habitat relationships and plant animal interactions. We have a class on spatial ecology and modeling. We do have some policy classes for our fish and wildlife law. We have the Southern African class. This goes hand in hand with some of the work that we're doing with cheetah conservation Botswana, as well as our study abroad. We have several faculty that work with human wildlife coexistence. So we have classes in that, as well as classes focused on avian pollinator, carnivore ecology, restoration ecology, population ecology. We also have the flexibility of creating what we call special topics. If a student is interested in something that is not on the books, we can investigate a way of creating a course in order to provide that curriculum option to the students. So some of the real interesting stuff that we do is our current research. And this is just an overview of some of the current projects that we have going right now. We've kind of crossed a whole diversity of different disciplines with what we're working on. So I'm just going to go through a few of these examples. One of the big ones that we've got with myself and Dr. Adam Mitchell, he is our entomologist, is a pollinator conservation in Texas grasslands. One of our projects is looking at plant drought response and insects. And so as you can see in this picture, this is one of our graduate students, Addison, and she's sampling the plants using a vacuum sampler to get the pollinators that are using these different plants. And this is a site where we're looking at different water levels and how the plants and thus the pollinators are responding. Dr. Mitchell's also working on some projects that are looking at productivity and nutritive value of pollen, especially like in grasses. So some of the pollen sources that maybe you don't normally think about. Also with pollinator work, we have a brand new project where we're using environmental DNA or eDNA to survey for some of the endangered bumblebees across the state of Texas. Dr. T. Wayne Schwertner, Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Daryl Murray, Dr. Jim Muir all work in collaboration with researchers in Botswana, as well as at Texas A&M University and with Cheetah Conservation Botswana. This is where they're working on human wildlife coexistence in these agricultural systems down in the Kalahari. They examine interactions with carnivores and private lands, and so some of the coexistence with livestock and the carnivores. We have a graduate student, PhD student, who's currently tracking lions. We've got some collars on some African lions. And they have also started some new research looking at biodiversity gradients from like water holes and how that might be influencing the biodiversity as you move from a water source in these very dry lands, as you move from that water and away from it. Dr. Hennon Cummings has what we call the aquaponics hydrotron, and this is one of our graduate students, Emmanuel Johnson, standing in the hydrotron. This is where we are looking at using this aquaponics to grow vegetables. It's also producing fish and other crayfish and stuff like that as well. So it's one of the newer, food production using aquaponics. And we've got some graduate students that are right now working on how black soldier larvae, fly larvae could be used as a feed alternative for the tilapia. And also looking at how increasing plant production, how they can increase the plant production while decreasing nutrient loss. A project that I'm involved in is working with rapid phenotypic divergence in a widespread songbird. That's a fancy title for us really looking at how songbirds might be adapting to climate change. So how they are able to quickly change their phenotype in response to changes in temperature. And so we're looking at with researchers at North Dakota and Oklahoma, at University of Kentucky, we are looking at how the birds are responding to this temperature gradient through hormones, physiology, and behavior. And down here, I really focus on the behavioral aspect of the birds and how they're responding to temperature changes. And as you can see, this is my graduate student, Lindsay, and they're holding one of our house sparrows. That's the bird that we're using as our model. And they're the little nestling, they're measuring the nestling. Dr. Adam Mitchell and I also have a project where we're looking at how kind of the impact of anthropomorphic factors are influencing wildlife. One of these projects is looking at microplastics. And so with that house sparrow project, we're looking at how those birds are consuming microplastics, ways to maybe sample through non-lethal means, like fecal sacs. And so the picture that you see on your left is my graduate student, Alex Hoxie, and he's processing some of the sparrow fecal samples and so that we can measure the microplastics in the birds. We're also looking at how those microplastics might be influencing reproduction, physiology, how they might be, influencing different things about the birds. We also have a really exciting project where we're looking at wildlife entanglement and erosion control products. So these are these erosion control beds. They're like netting that the Department of Transportation lays out after highway construction. And because it's a netting material, different animals can get stuck or trapped in it. So there's a bit of a risk. And so we're evaluating these different products to provide recommendations on which of those erosion control products might be better and less risky for wildlife. And as you can see, this is my graduate student, Ty, on the right, proudly holding one of our tarantulas. We have several tarantulas, and tarantulas are one of the species that we were looking at to see how they might be entangling in these erosion control products. We're also working with turtles and lizards and with mice and wild rodents. Dr. Daryl Murray and I have a project where we're working on the restoration of these riparian corridors. This is up at the Palo Pinto Mountain State Park and is funded by a local water district. And we were looking at how removing these ash juniper that have spread into these riparian areas might be, how the removal and the restoration of that, how it could be influencing invertebrates, the plant community, and the avian community. This is kind of tackling the question of restoring these lands can have sometimes both a positive but also a negative response to the ecosystem. So we're trying to address, how those responses might be beneficial or actually negative for some populations. Dr. Daryl Murray and Dr. Adam Mitchell are also really involved in some additional restoration projects that are take place more in a grassland area. They have a partnership with a few private landowners in the area where they're using drone imagery and ground-based measurements so that we can see the feasibility of using drones to collect some of this field data that is extremely time-consuming for us to go out to collect. They're also looking at soil moisture changes under different vegetation communities and how pollinators and trophic interactions are interacting along roadways. And this is one of our graduate students, David Johnston, and he's out at one of our beautiful study sites measuring the vegetation that we will then compare with the drone images. So in addition to the research, we also promote professional development with our graduate students. And this is a very important component of any type of a graduate degree. And professional development can mean lots of different things. One of the primary ones is research presentations. And we send students to lots of conferences at both the local, state, national, and international level. We typically have lots of students that go to the Wildlife Society meetings, the Texas chapter, but students who are also going to other like conservation biology or to Society of Range Management, but different conferences that students have the opportunity to present posters and also oral presentations. We also promote student mentorship as part of the professional development plans, where we have graduate students that actually mentor undergraduate researchers. So they are going to work with those undergraduate researchers on smaller research projects and helping them from the get-go, where they're creating and designing the project, all the way through those undergraduates also attending those conferences and giving presentations, or maybe even publishing. We've had several undergraduates publish their research because they have benefited from that mentorship from the graduate students. Because mentorship is very important in that professional development, and it gives you an opportunity to be involved in more research projects than just the one that you're focusing on. Additionally, our department has some study abroad opportunities. As we've mentioned, the work that they're doing in Botswana is also linked to a study abroad that Dr. Schwertner leads in Southern Africa. It's oftentimes in South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, Namibia, but it can change every summer. They may do something different. Dr. Hemanta Kafli also does a lot of work in Nepal and in Indonesia. So he has a study abroad trip every summer where he takes students to Nepal. That is actually a tiger, a Bengal tiger that they saw a couple of years ago on their study abroad. And he also takes students over the winter break to Indonesia. Now, although the study abroad programs are often focused to undergrads, we always have graduate students that go because the graduate students serve as TAs on those study abroads. They help as an additional leader, and it's always good to have, another leader, another mentor on the trip with you. So these are opportunities that are available to our graduate students. So if you have any additional questions or want some additional information, you can always reach out to me. My name, Dr. Heather Mathewson. My email is my last name @tarleton.edu. And then Dr. Jeff Breeden is our department head, and he is also happy to help answer questions, and his email is below as well. So please do feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mathewson. It's just fascinating to hear all that your program is up to. It's quite diverse. To our live audience members, I'll remind you, if you do have questions, please go ahead and submit those via the Q&A box or the chat box. We'll get those addressed. In the meantime, I did have a few questions of my own, if you don't mind. Well, I first wanted to clarify, where is this program offered and in what modality? Because Tarleton offers several locations, both in person and online.
So this program is located in Stephenville. And because of the nature of our science, it really requires hands-on work and education. And so it is an in-person only. We might have one class or two that could be done online, but those are usually done as a special situation. So maybe if we've got some of the graduate students that are in the field and need it to be online, but it is in person, and it is located here in Stephenville, Texas.
Yes. And so you mentioned that typically you would hope that anyone coming in has a background in natural resources. What type of student are you seeing? Are these people who are straight from undergrad, or are they people who are already in the workforce?
We actually get quite a mixture. So we have some graduate students who have come straight from undergrad right into joining us in our master's program. We've got a few of them who have been out in and working. Some of them that were doing some more internship based. But we've got a couple graduate students that spent some time working for different agencies or something and decided to return to receive their graduate degree. So our graduate students are really varied in age and experience. And so it brings a lot of diversity and a lot of different perspectives to the table as well, because you've got people that have had all these different experiences. We also get quite a few international students too. We've got, with our partnership with Botswana and with Dr. T. Wayne Schwertner and Dr. Hemanta Kafli have connections with Oxford University. So we do bring in quite a few international students, and also Dr. Hemanta Kafli with his connections in Nepal. So it's a really diverse group of students.
Yes. And are most students studying full-time or part-time?
Most of them are doing it full-time because it's here in Stephenville. Usually students are doing it full-time. Now, we do have some students who are working full-time and taking care of a family, and so that they are doing it part-time, and that is completely something that we can do as well. It's a discussion with your chair, and you've got to work out some of the logistics maybe with funding, but it is definitely something that we have students doing as well.
Yes. Um, you mentioned the committees and the chairs. How many students can a chair accommodate, and does that limit the number of people who can come into the program?
Yes, that does, especially on the research track, because there's so much more involved with research. You've got to have funding to conduct the research and then the working on the thesis. It's very time consuming for us as chairs. So we do have a maximum. Now, the professional track, we do not necessarily have a maximum on the professional track because they're not doing that research and the thesis. And so as a chair, we're not dedicating time towards development that with the student. The student's predominantly taking classes. We're still mentoring, we're still, suggesting different avenues or internships or experiences and everything. But because it's less time is required per student, we can take on many professional track. Coming back to research track, like I said, it is limited by our funding options and it is limited by the chair. So how many we can take is extremely variable. So for example, Dr. Mitchell and I both tend to have about 8 to 10 graduate students each. I currently have 10 master's students and 2 PhD students. Plus, we have some undergraduate researchers too. But some of our other professors usually only take on maybe 2, maybe 3 graduate students. And again, it's just very dependent upon our schedules. It's dependent upon the research. So sometimes the research projects themselves don't take quite as much time. So we can maybe take on a couple more students.
Mhm. Thank you for that. You had mentioned teaching assistants going to Botswana. I was wondering if you could explain more about what types of assistantships are available, how many might be available, and what's the process for seeking one, and when should someone start to have discussions about that? Is it when they first reach out, when they're trying to find a chair in the first place?
Yes. So there's kind of 2 routes to coming in. One is coming in and finding the chair and seeking out that information on your own, right? And when you do that, that is when the question needs to be had of what type of assistantships are available. We have teaching assistantships or departmental assistantships. And in those cases, there's very limited positions for that. We there's no application process for them because it's kind of as needed thing. So sometimes students who don't have full funding will go from a funded position and into a teaching position. So it's not something that you can apply to as a student. It's usually worked out between the faculty and the department head. But that's a conversation if you're coming in and wanting an assistantship that you need to have when you're trying to find your chair. And some of our professional track students also are welcome to have that conversation to try to find that assistantship. And having an assistantship, what we mean is that there's a stipend, that you get a stipend that comes along with it, that you paid. It's about $1,500 a month. So it's not a whole lot, but it is a stipend. And so that's what we mean by an assistantship.
Yeah,
It comes with funding. Now,
yeah.
the other avenue is replying to an announcement. So sometimes, like if we get funding from like USDA or NSF or Texas Parks and Wildlife to do a certain project, we will announce that we have an open position. And those usually all automatically come with a research assistantship. So they're funded off of the grant that has funded us to do the research.
Thank you. That helps a lot. You had mentioned comprehensive exams, and I was wondering, do they vary by student or do they vary by track?
They vary by the student and the committee. So if you, they do also vary by track. So if you're on a research track, you're going to do your thesis defense and you're going to do an oral comprehensive exam. It's typically an oral comprehensive exam where you sit in a room with your committee and we ask questions and you answer the questions. And then for the professional track, it's also usually an oral comprehensive exam as well. And but there are circumstances and there are some, students and some committee chairs who instead go the route of a written comprehensive exam where you're given some essay questions, and it may be that you're given in a lot of time. They can be very different and very flexible. And we do this because there are some situations where students just, they're better at communicating their knowledge either in a written, through a written avenue or through an oral avenue. And so we allow for a little bit of flexibility, but it also sometimes comes down to the chairs and the committee preference.
Thank you. Okay, just looking here at my list of questions here. So I'm very fascinated with the travel abroad. Who gets to go to Botswana and Nepal?
That's a conversation that's just had while they're here. So if a student is on a research track, they may not be able to go because the research that they're conducting maybe has to happen at the same time. So doesn't allow that flexibility. We've had both professional track and research track students go on the study abroad. So it's just really a conversation to be had when you get here. There's no guarantee, but the opportunities are available. And those are usually come with a stipend. So that's, that's why, yeah, it's a situation where the student will get a stipend to go so that it's, it's kind of their job to help out with coordinating and with logistics and with mentorship and everything while on the study abroad.
How long are those trips typically?
They sometimes vary. So the where they go within the location can change. But typically the one to Southern Africa is usually about 4 weeks.
Wow.
And then the Nepal is usually 2 weeks.
Okay, exciting. Well, I've enjoyed this discussion, Dr. Mathewson. Thank you so much for shedding light on all of the exciting things that are happening in your program. To our live audience members, I just want to remind you that this recording will be available to view on demand in the College of Graduate Studies YouTube channel. So feel free to revisit it as needed. And if you know of others who might be interested in this topic, we invite you to share this recording with them as well. So thanks to Dr. Mathewson for her time and for compiling such an engaging presentation. And with that, I think we can end our webinar. So thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.